white folk. Do you know how the YMCA came into business? The YMCA came in to try to protect these country white boys when they came into the city, to try to maintain their value in the face of the city. Do you know how the Sunday schools came into being? You think they just came into being as a result of the church? There was a whole Sunday school movement in America as a way of trying to rehabilitate the wayward white youth in the cities of America. Do you know how juvenile courts came into being? They came into being to teach the Jewish delinquents and the Irish delinquents. That's how they came into being. Do you know that adolescence as a concept is an invented concept that was created to deal with the wayward youth of white America in the 1800s down to the turn of the century, right into the 1920s. Because these gangs, these white gangs, had control of Newark, New Jersey. These white gangs had control of Philadelphia. These white youth gangs had control of New Orleans. These white gangs was roaming across New York City in the thousands and tens of thousands. White girls were on the streets of New York City at 9 years old. Half of the Irish families were without fathers. Half of the children were just pushed out in the streets by their families, and their fathers abandoned the families. Since when did you identify these things with being black? Because you have not read American history, and you have not read the history at all. You're too willing to believe the worst about yourself. And you'll let other people tell you any damn thing because you won't go and learn. And I'll tell you now, it's not enough just to read black history. You've got to read the history of this nation. Okay? And how do our sportsmen and spokesmen sit in front of a white interviewer on TV and is pushed to explain the behavior of black folks? Explain your behavior. Why do you kill? Why do you murder? Why do you enslave? What am I here on the carpet for? Explain to me why there's so many fatherless children. Well, tell me, why were there so many fatherless children in New York City that were of the Irish extraction? Why were these girls at 9 years old loaded down with syphilis?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, talk about it. Let's deal with it. Why were these people out here with their outdoor toilets in the backyards, with the sewage flowing over, racked with disease, such that when they would move in the neighborhood, the whole neighborhood would move out. Even black folk would leave out the neighborhood. Why were these people overrun as they were brought into this country with disease, with tuberculosis, cholera, and all other kind of diseases that had disappeared from America? And therefore people knew that when they would come into the neighborhood, you had to get out, or else the whole neighborhood would be plagued. Why were these people living in apartments that were built for one family, and they cut the apartments up into smaller size and put several families in it? Why were mothers and fathers, I'm talking about white folk here,
there you go.
why were mothers and fathers and children all laying up in one bed, in one room? Why did they have little boys' hotels where they fed them pork and beans and let them sleep standing up in a halter for 12 cents a night? Huh? Why were there thousands and 10,000s of white women on the streets of New York prostituting and begging? Why were these girls out there attacking and stealing and doing and cursing and doing all the other things that they were doing? You hadn't heard about that? Why do you see these old buildings with iron bars over the windows and so forth? Who were they protecting their contents from when black people weren't even in the city, huh? Look and come alive and see what was going on, ladies and gentlemen. This was what was going on in America. Why is it now today then, in an effort to save their youth, the whites then defined adolescence as a separate category from adulthood and gave it special characteristics and created a special court for these children? And nowadays, now that the black children are the ones that are the center and focus of criminality, they are redefining adolescence out of existence and saying now that they're going to treat 12 and 13-year-olds as adults. You must understand the politics of crime and understand the game that is being played here. You have to see that. How do you explain the fact that the word Irish and criminal was meant the same thing? Yeah, like today, black and criminal mean the same thing. You think this is new to you? Why then were the Irish overrepresented in the prison population of America, where the vast majority of prisoners were Irish in America? Huh? You didn't hear about that? Why did people get elected to political office running against the criminality of Irish people and running against the criminality of foreigners and strangers? So that you had the American Party, these so-called know-nothings, who elected several governors, who elected many congressmen, who took control of state legislatures running against the criminality of these folk. These Irish people weren't even seen as white people by other people. Why then did you have the shanty Irish and the lace curtain Irish? Why then did we talk about bourgeois blacks and the underclass blacks? Huh? In other words, you see, if you study that history stuff, you'll begin to see some principles operating here that have little or nothing to do with race, that are not intrinsically related to our Africanness or our blackness, but it's related to the political design of a system, related to the very criminal nature of a society that is designed to rob poor people of their dignity and to rob poor people of their wealth and to destroy poor people, such that it locks poor people up regardless of race, so that it locks outsiders up regardless of race, so that it locks people up who are seen as strange and foreign regardless of race, so that it attacks them as criminals and locks them up so that it can convince itself and those people that they are the greatest threat to the society and not the people who are locking them up.
Yes.
So that the focus can be on those who are being locked up and crime can be defined in terms of the pictures you see on the TV show of those who are being locked up and handcuffed, and not the crime of the ruling classes who are impoverishing these people and destroying their very lives. So that we cannot focus on the reconstruction of this society and see our goal is merely the reconstruction of the criminal and the rehabilitation of those families who are supposedly in trouble, and not the rehabilitation of these overfed white people and greedy pigs. So that we can see that the problem is one of increasing police power, of giving the police permission to execute black men on sight, and not to see the fact is that we need to reorient the power relationship between black and white folks in this nation and in this world, and reconstruct who has the power in this society. But as long as you see yourself as criminal, as long as you let the other people convince you that we are criminals, as long as we see the criminal as the poor boy on the street, we don't see the criminal as the ones in the suites. We don't see ourselves then, and we don't see the necessity of changing our economic circumstances and getting in control of our wealth. We don't see the necessity of bringing these white men to heel and changing the power relations and the economic relations in this world. We only want to focus on manhood training and only want to focus on trying to change the values of these kids. Focus on manhood training, but train them to be men enough to deal with white men. Train them to be men enough to change them. This is what we are talking about. I want you to study this Irish because they're very interesting. They were a conquered people in their own land. The British treated them like dogs. They were serfs to the British. A British man could beat them and kick them and dare them not, to hit back. They were not allowed to defend themselves against the British. That's the problem they still have there right today. And you're going to talk, you think because you got out of slavery the game is up. The Irish, and that game of the Irishmen and the British have been going on since the 1600s. And it's still going on right now. Yes, the British man could send for an Irish man's wife and sleep with her at will. He could send for his daughter and sleep with them at will. When the Irish were starving because of the potato drought, they weren't starving because of the absence of food. The Irish were growing more than potatoes. At the very time they were starving, they were shipping out all kinds of corn and cereal crops. They were shipping out beef and cattle. You hear what I said? Why? Because the British decided that they weren't going to give those cereals to the Irish, and they weren't going to feed them the meat and the milk and the stuff, because as one British lawyer said, we don't want to disturb the operations of the market. And they literally did destroy over 1 million of these people. The Irish population was half